Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel here, and on the road to the Grey Cup is on again. This time it's the 107th Grey Cup, ultimately going to be played right here in Calgary here. So let's start on the road to the Grey Cup here, and we have an interesting matchup here to start off the road to the Grey Cup in the East semi-final here, as we got two teams that are back in the playoffs this year after missing the playoffs last year. As you got the Edmonton Eskimos crossing over to take on the Montreal Alouettes here at Percival Molson Stadium at 11 a.m. kickoff Mountain Time on Sunday, November the 10th here to start off the CFL Playoffs on the road to the Grey Cup here. So just like last year, I'll break down the matchup here. I look on CFL.ca's website and read their article and come to my conclusions to their conclusions. There's a few things I agree and disagree on, but that's the beauty of free speech media here, is everyone has their opinion here, and I break down the matchup after I give season series and some playoff history, break down each facet of the game, and then here we are in Canada in November here, and every game going to the Grey Cup here is played outside. I give the weather forecast according to Environment Canada as of this recording, and then ultimately I give my pick, who I think is going to win, pickup style, and I give my percentage of confidence here. As I mentioned here, two teams back in the playoffs this year for the first time after they missed it last year. The Edmonton Eskimos, they weren't in the playoffs last year, but they were in it in 2017. The Montreal Alouettes, this is actually their first trip to the playoffs since 2014 here. So, I just say it's an interesting matchup we have in store here. So, how do we get here? Well, as I say, the Edmonton Eskimos crossed over because in the CFL here, if you have a fourth place team in one division that has a greater record than the third place team in the other division, that team crosses over and takes that seed. So this is actually the fourth straight season that a Western team, fourth place in the West, had a greater record than the third place team in the East, crossed over and took that spot in the playoff bracket here. So, as I say, the first game is the East semifinal. So here's how we got here. And obviously the winner of this game will be taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats at Tim Hortons Field a week later on Sunday, September 17th. That will also be 11 a.m. Mountain kickoff for 1 Eastern, depending on where you live here. So the records coming in, the Montreal Alouettes, they finished second in the East with a 10-8 record here. So they'll be hosting the East Final. In regards to the record, for a crossover team, the second place team, the second seeded team will host no matter if by chance the crossover team had a great record. And that's happened on a few occasions. But the Montreal Alouettes, 10-8, second East here. They were 6-3 at home here, and they were 5-5 versus the West here. So, the West Division was definitely a much tougher division once again, and that seems to have been the case in the last, few decades here in the CFL in general here, because it's never happened where a team from the East crossed over into the West to do that. That has not happened since the CFL did a crossover here. So that's the Montreal Alouettes. The Edmonton Eskimos, they were 8-10, fourth in the West here. They were 3-6 on the road, and they were a respectable 5-3 versus the East here. So that's the records coming in here. Season series here, well, this happened early in the season here. In fact, the first matchup actually happened in week 1 here, and I think this was actually the first game to kick off the 2019 CFL regular season here. The Montreal Alouettes were in Edmonton to take on the Edmonton Eskimos, obviously. In week 1, the Edmonton Eskimos won the first game, week 1, 32-25 here. I remember that game is that Trevor Harris had one heck of a debut for the Edmonton Eskimos, threw over 400 yards and connected with Greg Elton, just like their connection from the Ottawa Red Black days there. So that was the first matchup. The second matchup, this happened in week 6 here. This time, the Edmonton Eskimos were in Montreal, as the Montreal hosted that game, and the Montreal Alouettes won that game 20-10 there. And that highlight that game is that the Montreal Alouettes definitely realized that Vernon Adams Jr. was going to be their starting quarterback, because Antonio Pipkin was originally going to be their starting quarterback, but he got hurt there. But Vernon Adams Jr. took the job, and he's run with it since. So the season series was split, with the home team winning both games here. Playoff history, well, actually, these two teams have met for the Grey Cup 11 times here, and the Edmonton Eskimos winning 8 of those times. However, these two teams actually have met before, not for the Grey Cup. And actually, the last time the Montreal and Edmonton have played in the playoffs here, you got to go back to the 2008 East Final here, where the Montreal Alouettes defeated the Edmonton Eskimos 36-26 there. So the Montreal won that game actually in the Big O Olympic Stadium to get to the 96 Grey Cup that they hosted that year. So that's the last time these two teams have met. So this will be the second time Montreal and Edmonton will meet, not for the Grey Cup, but to get closer to the Grey Cup. In this case, the semi-final gets you around closer. Before that, in 2005, the 93rd Grey Cup in Vancouver here, the Edmonton Eskimos won that Grey game 38-35 with that thriller in overtime. And at that time, it was the first Grey Cup that needed overtime before the 104th Grey Cup in 2016 needed overtime then. And then the last one, I look at 3 or 4 games here. In 2003, these two teams met in the Grey Cup again. It was the 91st Grey Cup in Regina, and the Edmonton Eskimos won the Grey Cup that game with a 34-22 win. And as I mentioned, these two teams have met for the Grey Cup 11 times before, with the Eskimos winning 8 of them. So that's definitely a little playoff history here. So you can almost throw that all out the window here, because most players that were involved in the last game here weren't playing now. So now let's look at the matchup itself here. Starting with quarterback, the most important position here. You got Trevor Harris playing for Edmonton, who actually is just getting back into action here, as he got hurt in the Labor Day rematch game and just came back the second last game. He was rested last week, so we should have arrested Trevor Harris here, while the Montreal Alouettes have Vaz, as Milt Steve likes to call it, Vernon Adams Jr., who's had a spectacular season for the Montreal Alouettes, a big reason why they're back into the playoffs here. But I would give the advantage to this matchup to the Edmonton Eskimos here, just because Trevor Harris has a little more of a track record here. But who knows? I mean, they're going to have some young quarterbacks making their first professional playoff start in these playoffs here. So I give the advantage to Edmonton here, and also the fact that I think maybe Trevor Harris still has some familiarity with the East Division here from his time with, most recently, with the Ottawa Red Blacks here. So running back here, this is going to be an interesting matchup here for both sides. I mean, Montreal has William Stanback, and they also got Jeremiah Johnson, 2 pretty good running backs here. However, there's word that C.J. Gable for the Edmonton Eskimos will be healthy here, and they also got Shaq Cooper. So I'm going to say, with a healthy C.J. Gable coming back into the lineup here, I'm going to give this one a push. I don't think anyone's got an edge in this one coming in. Both teams have a very strong running game here, and I like this matchup to see, and that definitely played a role in the season series here. I like this matchup to see who comes out on top here on the ground here. So receivers here, well, Montreal has a nice mix of youth and veterans. I mean, Quinn Bray is the rookie that stood out this season, but they also got guys like Eugene Lewis, Jake Wonecki, another rookie, as well as they got veterans like Devere Posey, who has won the Grey Cup on the big stage before, and Chris Matthews. Yeah, that Chris Matthews that was a nice pickup for the Stampeders last year. However, Edmonton has Greg Ellingson, who Trevor Harris is definitely familiar with him and made some big plays in the Grey Cup. As well, they got DeVaris Daniels, who is also a big threat out there, and Tavon Smith. So I'm going to give the edge to the Edmonton Eskimos here when it comes to receivers here. especially with Greg Elgson, who can definitely make the big play there. The offensive line here. These are the big guys up front to protect the quarterback and open the holes here. Montreal has Trey Rutherford to lead the way here. However, a devastating loss for the Montreal Alouettes since they lost Tony Washington. That's definitely going to hurt their chances, hurt their offensive line here, as they've been having a patchwork here, but still credit for Montreal turning things around here. However, Edmonton, led by the tallest offensive line guy in the league at Matt O'Donnell, who is also given credit to leading their way to open up the running game for the Edmonton Eskimos and Trevor Harris against the protection here. And actually, it was pointed out when I was at the Labor Day rematch game that guy is 6'11", and when I saw him on the field there, he definitely looks much taller than the other offensive line here. So with that, and the fact that Edmonton's had a strong running game overall, I'm going to give the advantage to Edmonton here, especially with the Tony Washington injury for the Montreal Alouettes here. So that's the offensive side of the ball here. So let's flip to the defensive side of the ball here and see who has the edge here. Well, Edmonton, as a team here, allowed the fewest sacks and actually delivered the most sacks in the CFL here. So watch out for guys like Mike Moore, Kawhi Boateng, and Nick Usher here. Although Montreal, they still have the Aegis under John Bowman, who I think he actually played in the 2008 East Final there. So I'm going to give the advantage to Edmonton there, because as a group there, they allowed the fewest sacks and produced the most sacks here. So Edmonton's got the advantage here immediately on the defensive line here. Linebackers here, though, Edmonton made sure that they beefed up in that category after a rough season last year. So they got Devon Santos Knox, originally from Winnipeg, and Larry Dean, who used to be with Ottawa. But they've been getting lots of production from Vontae Diggs here. However, Montreal has got no slouches on the linebackers in the middle there, led by Enoch Mwamba and Chris Aki here. So when it comes to the linebackers, I give this a push. I think it's an evenly matchup there. So the defensive backs here, these are the guys that protect, look to make the big play with interceptions and frustrate receivers here. Well, the Edmonton is led by Josh Johnson. As well, they got guys like Forrest Hightower and Monty Hunter here. However, Montreal may even this matchup out, as they got Santi Evans and Tommy Campbell here, and I know they were both great defensive backs here when they were here in Calgary. So I'm going to say it's a push there as well for the defensive backs here. So now we get to the special teams here. So we'll look at the return game here. Guys who can return the ball, make some big plays, give instant field position. As you all know, at the end of the day, football is a field position game. Montreal has Mario Alford, while Edmonton has Christian Jones here. And based on this matchup, I am going to give the edge to the Montreal Alouettes here, as Mario Alford has definitely shown he has returned a few punts back for a touchdown here. So I like Mario Alford in this matchup here. Last thing is the kicking game. You gotta give respect to the kickers here, because sometimes the game might come down to the kickers here, and they either they get too much credit or too much blame if things go well or don't go well here. Edmonton has longtime veteran Sean White, while Montreal has Boris Bede there, who has revived his game here. Both have strong kickers here, but I think Sean White is a little more of a stable kicker and be counted on a little more. So I'm going to give the edge to the Edmonton Eskimos here. So as I say, it's an interesting matchup here. I think it's going to be a close matchup here. But we'll see once I get to the last elements of the game here, of the video here, who I think is ultimately going to win here. So the weather forecast, it could be a sloppy game here. And maybe there could be some turnovers or a lot more ground game, as they're forecasting periods of snow or rain, a high of 6 in Montreal here. Cloudy periods, a low of -9 here. So this is as of this recording here, a couple days out here. Subject to change here, but I go to Environment Canada for the same source for all the videos here to be consistent here. So it could be a messy game here if we're looking at the forecast here. So now, before I make my pick, this is where I go to this team will win if. So Montreal will win if, I say, if Vernon Adams has time to finders the receivers, gets time in the pocket there. I would say Montreal will win if they outrun the Edmonton Eskimos there. And that was a big part in the second game there. Montreal win, obviously, if they win the turnover battle here, and there's potential for could be a sloppy game here with the weather here. And I'll say Montreal win if one of their wide receivers stands out and has a great game there. So those are my points that I think would take for Montreal to win this matchup. Edmonton will win if Trevor Harris, I say, continues his red-black form here. I mean, remember last year, he set an Ottawa Red Blacks record for 6 touchdowns passed in a game in the East Final last year. And previous chemistry with Greg Ellenson. They definitely have had some history with some success there. So I'm going to say if Trevor Harris can channel his red-black magic there now with the green and gold. I'm going to say healthy CJ Gable, a big game here. That's definitely going to even out the running game here, I think. With a healthy CJ Gable, apparently it's expected he's going to play. I'm obviously going to say if Edmonton will win, if they pressure Montreal's offense there. If they continue on with their producing the most sacks here, doing some somersaults, I think that could be a big advantage there for the Edmonton Eskimos to win. The last one is if Christian Jones has a big game with returns here. If Christian Jones steps up out of Mario Alford here. And the last thing I'll mention, I did this last year, but I'll mention in the video now that the day before game day, I'll look at the depth charts and see who's in and out, and I'll pin that comment in the video here. So if there's anything, let's say for example, if CJ Gable wasn't going to play, I'll pin that in a comment, and that could sway the matchup there. So I'll pin any notable additions or omissions in the video after this recording here. So who do I think is going to win the Eastern semifinal here and move on to take on the Hamilton Tiger Cats here? I actually am going to give this to the Edmonton Eskimos, but I'm only going to give them a 40% confidence here. I think it's going to be a very, very close matchup here. It's definitely an interesting matchup, just how these two teams shake down. I mean, they look pretty close, but there's a couple key areas there that I think Edmonton's got the slight edge in, that I could see him pulling this out despite having a not so strong road record here. But Edmonton has a little more experience here. But Montreal, they got nothing to be ashamed about. I mean, I didn't think they were going to... I mean, the East was wide open outside of Hamilton, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised at how Vernon Adams Jr. stepped up and Kari Jones, coach. I mean, considering that Mike Sherman was let go after training camp, and then they eventually let Kavis Reed, the general manager, go after week 4. So there's strange decisions that need to get made, but it was odd with the timing there. So that's definitely my take on preview on the Eastern semifinal to start the 2019 CFL Playoffs and on the road to the 107th Grey Cup here. So if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to follow along here. And after this video, I'll make my preview for the Western semifinal here. And enjoy the playoffs, and I'll see you in the next video. And next week, I'll preview the East and West final after we have the semifinals in the books here, and see who gets one step closer to coming here to Calgary to battle for the Grey Cup. So I'll see you then.